Welcome back to Death Toll Racing. We're doing sway bars today on the Safari Wagon. They are not going to be particularly easy because I wasn't planning ahead enough for these things. So especially on the front, it could be a bit of a challenge getting these things on there so that they don't hit. I already did some measurements and I ordered them up via the lengths that I came up with, and so hopefully that doesn't bite us as well. But what they are is they're essentially a torsion bar. So it's splined on either side. It's a torsion bar that will run inside this tube. This tube will be fixed to the car via these brackets maybe, or we might come up with something different. Not that there's anything wrong with those, I just may not be able to make it work on this thing. And then it runs inside that DOM tubing with these bushings, and that's what the axle shaft or the torsion bar slides on, just during normal straight up and down bumps. And then when you're going articulation, then you're actually just twisting this bar back and forth, which seems crazy that you twist that big bar, but they do. So you have your end link. This is the center part, and on either end you'll have the spline part that goes on the shaft itself, and then the end link holder that will hold our end links that we have to make as well. And those are just heim joints, little inserts, and then that's what this stainless steel tubing is for. The inserts go in there, the heim joint threads into it, and then you just make the end links the length you need so that it doesn't crash into stuff. And then the other end of the end link will be on these little tabs that will go to the axle. These caps, these little red caps, if you're eyeballing them, those are just decorative. They just go on the end of the axle shaft. Just kind of makes it a little cleaner. Shouldn't actually do anything other than cosmetic. These are clamped on via bolts, so those shouldn't go anywhere. These are not retained in, so I am going to make it, when we do it, we're going to make this so that the tube is the right length to where the end, our end link here holds this bushing in. We don't want to have that in here and then this out there, and then this would just slowly work its way out to the outside and eventually fall out, and everything's rattly and noisy and you sound like you got a piece of crap. So anyway, let's get going on it. It is not going to be easy on the front. Hopefully we can make it work, but we're going to come up with something. It may even involve putting this up in the engine compartment, so we'll see. All right, to start with, we're just going to put our links together. Very easy. I would, you know, keep in mind it is aluminum, so anti-seize is pretty key on it. And these are very milled, very close tolerance, so everything goes together really tight. It's pretty easy. If you have one piece of dirt in there, the bolts won't go in the hole. So just keep in mind that there's a left hand and a right hand end link holder on them. If you guys are interested in doing them, they do make those opposite, so that way the letters are out on both sides. So you'll basically assemble them opposite of each other. And what I'm doing now is I measured the angle of the steering brace bracket that we already had, and we're going to build ours. We're going to permanently mount the outer sleeve tube of the sway bar to that steering brace mount, because that comes off independently, so it'll be removable that way. So we don't need to make the sway bar removable itself. That it can just be part of the steering brace. So the outer sleeve comes long, so you have to trim it down to length, the desired length that you need it. You do have some adjustment in width via the splines on the outside. It won't look very good if you made it narrower because the splines would be sticking out the outside, but you could do that if you had to. So when I tack things on, I try to tack them on. I'll make it off intentionally in one direction, and then I'll tack it so that I'm able to bend it back to get it to the where I need it exactly, if that makes sense. So if I need it to bend one way, I'll just make sure I tack it on the side to where it'll allow it to bend the one direction. So I'll intentionally make it one side, then I'll tack it and then tap it in until I get it right where I want it, and then I can tack it up to lock it in. Okay, so what I was just looking at, when you put these on, you're basically putting them face to face. Well, actually, putting them inside out, like that, on either end of the bar. And what I was just looking at is the splines aren't exactly the same when you do that, unfortunately. They line up slightly off. So I'll line them up here, and you can show you how far off it is. But you can see that when you have a 16-inch arm coming off of it. So that is crudely the setup we got. Okay, so our sway bar is here. Our end lengths are going to come from there down to basically in line with this weld for the pad on the bump, the hydraulic bump stops. And we need to put our tabs on this tube like this. And unfortunately that doesn't work because then the holes don't line up and there's not enough room to just cut one shorter to offset it. So we're gonna have to actually make a little flat area where our tabs are gonna go. So that way we'll prefab these onto a little tab, and then we'll weld that on and then make it look pretty. All right, and what I'm looking at here is I am definitely going to have to move my steering cylinder now, which is totally fine because the thing is not in an ideal spot anyway. It's kind of been bothering me the whole time we've had this thing put together. Okay, so I got the plan. I'm going to take them back off and we're going to clean them up so they look a little bit nicer than they do now, so it doesn't just look like a piece of angle iron stuck on the side of a tube. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and take the steering cylinder off and let the fluid all drain out. We are going to have to change the fittings. I can't use those 90s anymore, but I do have a plan, you'll see in a second, on how we're going to remount that cylinder so that it is out of the way of the steering arms and now our sway bar links as well. All right, and so I am going to drill a hole and add a grease fitting to these so that I can keep those bearings greased without having to take it apart every time. They do not, this isn't something that comes with it. This is something I'm adding. Spoiler alert on this one, I wish I would have put the fittings in from the other side, and the reason for that is the end links have the split in them for the clamping part of the end link that goes on the outside of the splines, and so the grease likes to come out right at that split, and it's in line with the grease fitting. So if those were on the other side, it would have made the grease try to work its way around the bearing a little bit better than it does now. But it works either way. It's just a little messier this way. And here I'm just measuring for the end links. I'm moving the bar up and down to match the suspension travel compression so it doesn't bottom out on the frame during compression. And so I'm just getting that where I need it, and then I'll measure up the end links, get them made, and I painted them, and now we're going to immediately modify them because they don't work the way they are. So they got painted real nice, and now we're going to ruin all the paint and start over again. So I got the weld all the way around on the other side, but we are going to use a weld as a gusset to try to transition the inside joint of that. Since there is going to be a lot of weight, it's going to be trying to straighten that joint out the entire time it's being used. So we're basically using a weld as a gusset on the inside. All right, so now I'm going to change the 90-degree reusable hydraulic fittings out for some straight ones. There is a link in the description below that is to the video where I do those fittings, and I show you pretty detailed on how to use those reusable hydraulic fittings. Okay, so there it is. That's how it had to be, just the way, I mean, basically I have to clear this and I have to clear the steering arm. That's with it turned to the locks as I have it set now. We may be able to increase the locks now because what was limiting it before was the cylinder being in between, basically here in the truss. It was actually down below the truss, it was that plate. And now that's out of the way, so we may be able to actually turn it a little bit more, but we will adjust the stops once we get it on the ground. We'll get it in articulation, and then we'll adjust the steering stops. But for now, that will work really good, but we need to fully flex it to make sure everything clears. So this is not ideal at all for an in-link. I had to do it, but if or when this fails, it's going to break right there. The Heim joint will break right at that nut. That's where this is going to fail. That is the weak point in this by doing it this way. All right, so now we're going to mount our steering ram assist cylinder on, and then I'm just straightening my wheels and then centering the cylinder, and that way the cylinder's right in the middle, so it should work going both ways. It should be about even travel going both. All right, I'm going to change out. One of my boots had a hole in it, the tie rod boots. So I'm going to put a link in the description below for those boots. For some reason, they're not listed on Energy Suspension website. So I got a link below. Blue Loctite on these caps because those technically could come loose if you don't put Loctite on them, since they're stopping against a fake joint, if that makes sense, where the link and the axle tube end. All right, guys, so there it is. It is not 100% perfect yet. So there is going to be one more video coming out next week where we address the angle of this arm. We're going to lower that down with the drop fitment arm because we do have a collision here during certain situations. And we got to remedy it. So there is one more video on this, and we're going to adjust our caster and stuff a little bit more and get that a little bit better. But in the end, it looks actually pretty darn cool for having a sway bar. It's pretty cool sway bar. So rear sway bar video is out now as well. I uploaded them separately just because it was such a long video. So anyway, check that one out. And then we got a tracker video coming out, a real short one coming out soon. And we will see you again shortly when we address the steering geometry on this thing.